Good morning, Emma.
How are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
Good, good. So Dan is Chief Procurement Officer at Schneider Electric. So really great to have you on board today, Dan. So you're going to be talking about leveraging digital to enhance remote supplier relationships, which I guess has been massively important over the last 2 years. So I'll hand over to you for your presentation, and then I'll come back at the end with some questions. So please make sure you get your questions in nice and early for Dan, and I'll be looking out for them and pop back at the end to facilitate that. So over to you, Dan.
Great. Thanks a lot, Emma, and thank you for the opportunity to share today. I like talking about digital and specific, how it helps in our supplier relationships, because I think it's a topic that is quite transversal across many different industries. I mean, supplier relationships are important to all of us. And I think many of us and many of the leadership teams of our companies have learned some important lessons about that over the last couple of years, right? About exactly how important it can be to our business to have a strong relationship with our suppliers. And the current situation with the virus has put us all of us in a spot where we can't have the face-to-face contact that we've been enjoying up until a couple of years ago. So certainly in Schneider, you mentioned Emma, it's one of the things that many companies did not put on hold during the crisis of last year, and that's definitely the case in Schneider. There are some things in digital that we did pause on that weren't as critical, but most things I would say were even accelerated through that crisis. I want to take a few minutes to maybe give you some background before I dive into the specific topic for those of you that might not be familiar with our company. And I like to start with why, right? So what is the purpose of Schneider? And in Schneider, what we do is we empower everyone to make the most of our energy and resources to bridge progress and sustainability for everyone. So in Schneider, we call this Life is On. A bit more about what the company does, right? So we're providing energy and automation digital solutions, right, for efficiency and for sustainability. And I'll get into a little bit more about what end markets we're focused on and exactly how we deliver on the efficiency and sustainability commitment. But first, some key figures. It's about a 25 billion euro company, growing pretty fast. 5% of the revenue is dedicated to R&D. So we're really a technology company in the end. That's the core of the core. A big chunk of our revenues in new economies, right? Fairly well balanced around the world, and we're fairly big company with 128,000 employees. Now we're positioned kind of uniquely in the market, right? On one hand, energy management, and with a major, say, tailwind of the energy transition behind us. About 25% of the world's energy today comes from electricity. In the coming decades, that mix is going to change substantially, right? First and foremost, with the obvious of transportation shifting towards electric-driven vehicles. And on the industrial side, we have the Industry 4.0, the industrial revolution ongoing. So with these two businesses, we have the opportunity to deliver sustainability and efficiency for our customers, and they really go hand in hand. We're playing in a number of key end markets, right? First and foremost, buildings, right? Buildings are emitting about 40% of the world's CO2. So to the extent that we can digitize, automate, and simplify the electrification of buildings, we drive efficiencies, we drive sustainability, we drive CO2 reduction. We're one of the world's biggest providers of electrification solutions for data centers, right? Obviously a massive growth area, especially in the last few years, as many of us are working from home and connecting more remotely to our colleagues and to our suppliers. And then, of course, the industry and infrastructure being core. And again, the revenue is fairly well balanced throughout the year. We're very much, we're a French headquartered company, but we're very, multinational in terms of the markets that we serve. Now, inside Schneider, we have this thing called global supply chain. It's about 80,000 people strong. And this is the entire supply side of the business, all organized under, say, one leadership, right? We have a chief supply chain officer who is my boss, who's running all of these nearly 200 factories, nearly 100 distribution centers, right? And the functions that support planning, logistics, and of course, procurement. So I'm running the procurement function. We've got really tens of thousands of suppliers, about 7 billion in production parts procurement, about 12 billion euros in in total spend that we manage in one verticalized organization. So this is really powerful for us. I mean, on one hand, we have a lot of leverage, right? We have a scale, but we also are organized very regionally and locally, right? We empower the local teams with a lot of decision-making capability, and we give them the accountability to execute, right? So we think we're fairly agile, but also really the way I like to put it, we leverage our size without our size getting in our way. That's the objective. So within global supply chain, you might have seen we've been recognized the last few years by Gartner as the #4 supply chain in their top 25, #1 industrial company, and #1 overall in Europe. And this doesn't happen by chance. We've been constantly transforming our supply chain for the last couple of decades through various transformational programs. And the current version of that we have today is called STRIVE. STRIVE's an acronym: sustainable, trusted, resilient, intelligent, velocity, and efficiency. These are the things that we're trying to deliver for our business and for our customers. And this is the umbrella under which we define our transformation, right, in global supply chain. And I mention all of this because digital is embedded in every element of STRIVE. It's a massive enabler within supply chain, within procurement, to drive those strategic initiatives forward, right? Whether it's sustainability, which again is the core of our value proposition. Therefore, it's very much in the core and in the DNA of what we do in global supply chain and with our suppliers. On quality, on building resilience in the supply chain, and of course, partnering with suppliers, which is the main point of my talk today. Now, on that partnership topic, we are absolutely driving a transformation with respect to how we engage with our suppliers. I would say historically, like many other companies, we were somewhat transactional on how we were dealing with suppliers, right? We like many other companies, are focused very much on delivering productivity, delivering cost reduction year after year. We don't have a strategy in Schneider of being the cost leader in the market in general, but we have to stay competitive. So the pressure is always there to deliver on productivity. But I would say in the past decade or so, we became, I don't want to say too focused on productivity, but too narrow in our focus on how we are engaging with our suppliers. So we've taken a step back from that. And this what was initiated even before the current crisis, to really decide which suppliers, which of those 14,000 plus suppliers we really want to align ourselves with, and then go deep with developing those relationships, right, through executive sponsorship. So, you know, I like to think of procurement not as a support function, more as a business function. And our role in that is to orchestrate the business with our suppliers. And for me, it means, you know, coming to the table with the CEO of a supplier, not just as a procurement person, but together with the business leadership from the Schneider side. That really is helping us accelerate a number of strategic transformations that we have under that STRIVE umbrella. Digital interaction is an important part, say, of this partnership, right? So it's taking you know, all the transactional things that we do, that we spend a lot of time discussing with suppliers, and automating them as much as possible. And I'll go deeper on that this morning in my talk. And then it's also taking the more say strategic processes that we engage with, and putting them all into one platform. So we kind of have one single version of the truth of our relationship with each of those suppliers. And we don't have things sitting in inboxes and mailboxes and hard drives of individuals in the company. There's one 360-degree view of our relationship with each of those key customers. And an important element of all of this is innovation, right? Again, we're a technology company, but we don't develop all of that technology ourselves. We rely very heavily on our suppliers to help us to co-innovate the offer of Schneider, to enable us to advance on the sustainability agenda, and to deliver unique technologies to the marketplace. And digitization plays a super important role in that. So partnership with suppliers, a very core element of our broader global supply chain strategy in Schneider. So how do we leverage digital to bring those supplier partnerships to life? Well, to give a bit of context to that, and if there's anything that you take away from this presentation that really any of you should be able to copy and paste if you choose to, it would be this, the procurement digital strategy and how we've structured that into these 4 main buckets. Again, I think this is very transversal across many different industries. It's definitely not specific only to ours. The first one is data, right? Everything with digital begins and ends with data, how you manage it, how you master the ongoing maintenance and manage the life cycle of that master data. That's the first thing that you absolutely need to be focused on. And with data under control, you have an opportunity then to employ advanced automation, right? So this is advanced analytics and automation in maintenance of that master data, right? So really simplify the way that the processes around data management so that we can free up the energy of people to do things that are more value add, right? Having a single source of truth, having a golden set of data that's not duplicated across many different platforms. I think it really is at the core of our data management processes. So data management, advanced automation, and then the third pillar being supplier interaction. And I'm going to double click on that one in a minute, but this is the digital ecosystem that we have with our suppliers for transactional processes and also for the more strategic processes to really enable that strategic partnership I was discussing. And then the fourth and arguably the most important pillar is the people side. This is one where, I believe, we share a lot in Schneider. We share a lot of our best practices with many other companies in the interest of learning and hoping that others share back so we can learn something and apply into our own processes. And in doing that, a lot of this stuff can be copied, right? So our competitors could copy how we do data management, advanced automation, supplier interaction, et cetera. They can copy the processes and the tools, but they can't copy the people. That's the one thing that can really be the main differentiator. So we put a lot of energy into hiring for digital competency. It's one of the KPIs of our recruiting practices. At what level are these people that we bring into the company with respect to digital expertise? And of course, there's ongoing programs of digital competency building up and down the organization. So the people development side needs to be absolutely at the core of any procurement digital strategy. So let's double click now on the supplier interaction piece, because I think this is really the main enabler to leveraging digital to really enhance your supplier partnerships. And it might be a bit of a confusing slide. Let me walk through, because I think it's important to understand how we think about this and structure this in Schneider. And maybe start on the right-hand side of the screen, where you have the procure to pay processes, right? So this is the transactional stuff. This is purchase orders, advanced shipment notices, PO confirmations, invoices, et cetera, right? It's all the transactional things that are necessary in interacting with our suppliers. And how we've structured that digital backbone in Schneider is we have really 2 main systems, and apologize for these crazy acronyms, but SSP, SCM. So what that is Schneider Supplier Portal, Supply Chain Management. In short, this is for the direct material, how we manage all those transactional processes. And we have a very simple platform that's purchased, right? Where suppliers can decide on their own if they want to just use a simple web portal and key in data manually, or if it's a larger, higher transaction supplier, they can go with a full EDI connection into that platform. But the idea here, of course, is to simplify as much as possible and to make hands-off as much as possible all those transactional exchanges with suppliers. On the indirect side, we come with a different solution because it's integrated to the entire procure-to-pay process internally. Here we're using Coupa, like I think many other companies are probably using. And there's some, this is a bit of an oversimplified graphic, there's some overlap here as well. But I think you get the message on the direct side, indirect side, dedicated solutions for the transactional processes, right? And the KPIs here are, let's make sure that we're doing as many of those transactions as possible in those digital platforms because they deliver the efficiency and the quality that we need. Now, the real value though comes more on the right side of the screen. So these are the things that with the transactional stuff under control and not being a distraction, we can focus on developing those supplier relationships, right? And here we kind of look at it in two different, say, lenses. One is the source to contract processes that are necessary to run a category, right? So supplier qualification, e-sourcing, contract management, right? The entire process, including approvals and signatures of contracts, all those sort of, not transactional, but still necessary and important processes to be run in one platform. So that's part of the story. The other part of the story is the real supplier relationship management. So every kind of interaction I'm having with those suppliers, I want to have in that same platform. So again, I can have the 360-degree view of our relationship with each of those suppliers every time I go to meet them. And at the center, I don't want to overlook this as well, because it links back to the data management that I mentioned before. This is, we oversimplify, we put MDG, this is master data governance. And the key of this graphic is that it's at the core. It's at the core of everything. If we don't have that right, nothing else is going to work, right? So a lot of emphasis is put here on making sure that master data is as clean, robust, and current as we can possibly make it. So let's go a little bit deeper on the supplier relationship management piece and talk about what our vision was in building this ecosystem and this tool. Again, what we have in mind is every kind of interaction with a supplier being digitized in the same platform. So it's not just the procurement stuff, that's part of the story, but also quality, right? The quality performance, the quality evolution. We have some suppliers where we connect at the machine level in their factories and collect information off those machines and bring them into our tool to proactively monitor the quality of their processes, right? We don't want to do that in some other platform. We want to do that all in the same platform. So as a category leader, a supplier leader, you have the full view. Same with planning and capacity, long-term capacity planning, those kind of activities that may be led by the planning organization, innovations that might be being co-worked on between R&D and suppliers, and sustainability. We have a number of very progressive sustainability programs with our suppliers. The least of which not being is the Zero Carbon Project, where we're embarking with 1,000 of our strategic suppliers to reduce their carbon emissions, scope 1 and 2, by 50% over 5 years, right? All of those interactions are all taking place in the same platform. We don't have some off network Excel tracking the CO2 of our suppliers. We're asking them to enter it into the platform, right? So you end up with a transparent and hopefully accurate exchange of information between suppliers and the whole ecosystem of people in Schneider that are interacting with those suppliers. Again, not just procurement, right? So again, source to contract, procure to pay, supplier relationship management, and just generic procurement things. I won't go into those details. But I think it does pay to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that are involved in this SRM portal. First of all, we have really most of the suppliers now connected that we need to have connected, and a massive number of Schneider users. We have 1,400 people in procurement, which is kind of a lot, but there's 4,000 Schneider people using this tool on a regular basis, right? We started as well to maybe rewind to the deployment, because I don't have any slides here that talk about how we ramped the deployment of this thing. But in 2020, or 2020, our plan was to roll out to 2,000 or 3,000 suppliers, right? We were just getting started. And then when COVID hit, we realized, well, we have a need to connect with these folks digitally as fast as possible so we can have a continuous and systematic update of their status, right, of their ability to serve the demand. So we immediately ramped up, and in 2020, we were up to nearly 10,000 by the end of the year. against our target of only a few thousand. So to give you an idea of kind of how we redirected some energy and accelerated dramatically the deployment of that technology. So now we're up to about 15,000 suppliers. Again, a vast majority being quite regular users, doing many different things. Again, some of the routine supplier relationship management processes, which you see on the bottom here, e-sourcing, supplier qualification, contract management, management of some of the innovation ideas and performance management. But then some more, I would say, progressive things as well, such as risk management, really all consolidated into the one portal. Managing action plans related to any of our programs, whether it's sustainability, quality improvement, productivity, innovation, whatever we're expecting a supplier to do and when we're expecting them to do it by is logged, again, centrally. So we have that 360-degree view, right? So again, I think it's quite the accomplishment that we've achieved so far on that one. Just to wrap now with some of the key success factors that we've reflected on over the last few years while we've designed and deployed this thing. You know, we didn't take some off-the-shelf software and change our processes to match what the software was defining. We didn't think that was the right path for Schneider, again, because in Schneider, we're intending to be a leader, right? We're again, coming back to my comments before about the Gartner rankings, and it's not to boast, but we do believe that we need to stay in the front of the pack with respect to overall maturity of supply chains in order to remain in the front of the pack as a company, right? So we didn't take the off-the-shelf software. We took our own processes. We looked at the processes that were defined by the software companies, right? And we made our own use cases from the bottom up, right? For each of those processes, we clearly defined what's needed, and we prioritized based on, you know, what the impact is of that development and what benefits we might get, right? So it was a very much a co-development with software companies to make this tool and to make this ecosystem, right, where we can interact with our suppliers. We involved as well stakeholders and users, you know, both internal and external, so including suppliers in the development of this thing. So it's not something that we just made in a vacuum and then imposed on our people and on our suppliers. It was very collaborative, and it takes longer that way. Anytime you involve more people, you get more opinions, and those opinions differ, and you have to work through all of that. But in the end, I'm convinced that you end up with something that is easier to deploy and more openly accepted, right? When you consider the input of more stakeholders, more users in the upfront development. I mentioned co-innovation with technology providers. I think that's also key for us. Again, that was our strategy. It might not be the strategy that fits for everyone. It's not easy. It's harder that way, I guess, to get a product to the point where you're ready to deploy it. But again, this was done with eyes wide open and intentionally on our side. And there's some risks that come along with that, right? Because when you create something unique with somebody else, then you're dependent on them for the long term to maintain and to continue to enhance that digital ecosystem, right? But for us, that's a calculated risk that we're more than willing to take, because we end up with something that is more powerful, more unique, and puts us in a position where we can be more efficient and more effective as a procurement organization with that technology. This second to last bullet really is one of the most important ones. And, you know, I didn't introduce myself too much at the beginning. I've been a CPO for a while now, but only 3 years in Schneider. I worked in a couple other companies, mostly in this industry. When I came into the company, there was a team in my organization that was really their only mission was driving adoption of digital technologies that had already been developed. People had been trained, and we were expecting them to use, but they were there to help these people along and really drive adoption. It's something I'd never seen before. I'd never seen it was falling somewhere in between the IT department and the procurement department, and it was a mix of IT type people and digital savvy procurement people making up that organization. But for me, I see very clearly now that's a massive differentiator in any company's ability to drive the adoption of the tool. So, when you have a problem with a software, you call, the online help desk, right? And you get a tech that's going through a checklist of processes to try to solve your problem, right? In our case, you get someone who has been in your shoes, who knows the digital technology inside and out, and can more quickly say get to and more say accurately guide you through how to execute, say, using those digital tools. So for me, it's a massive success factor in getting to what I would call critical mass adoption of something that's new. Finally, culture. This is also a make or break factor in any kind of digital transformation. We have to have the mindset of the people open to change, open to working in a different way, right? With any digital technology, in my experience, the first time you use it, it's not as easy as your old way of working, right? So there's a hump to get over there. The skills of those people I mentioned before, our hiring practices and our digital competency development programs that we have in Schneider and in global supply chain, key success factors. And then creating a network and community of people that can exchange, right, on those technologies, also quite an important factor in really changing the culture to one that's more digital, using digital, say, as a reflex. So that's it from my side. I hope I've given some good insights that could be helpful for others in terms of how to leverage digital for enhancing relationships with suppliers. And I'm happy now to take some Q&A.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. That was great presentation. And we've got loads of questions, so I'm going to try and rattle through as many as possible. If you could stop sharing your screen, that would be fabulous. Yep. Thank you. Excellent. So, very complex supply chain, very large supply chain, and you talked about the need for the data being at the core of that, really. How hard is it to get that data accurate, and how so you have that single point of truth?
Yeah, I don't want to say it's the hardest part, but it might be, especially in an environment like ours. We're a company that has grown organically a lot lately, but we are at our core a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of different legacy companies, right? So with that comes a very messy ERP footprint. I don't even know how many we have. If I did, I would be embarrassed to share. But we're on a roadmap of harmonizing those things and bringing them together, and that's absolutely a key success factor. And then also, not just having fewer ERPs or ideally one ERP, but also the governance that you put around those things. Like we're an SAP shop. I think probably like many of you are, and with SAP Master Data Governance, that you don't have to use that in order to use SAP, and we hadn't been using that to manage our suppliers in recent years, and now we've almost fully deployed MDG for supplier management. So controlling the process of creating suppliers and managing suppliers, and which suppliers are, we have our supplier orientation chart that defines who's preferred, which suppliers may be blacklisted, et cetera, but who controls the execution of that? Well, without that master data governance, it's the wild west in a company like ours, because we are so empowering, right, of all the local operations, which we don't want to change, right? But also we need to introduce some very targeted controls. So the supplier data management is one good example of where we've leveraged, the functionality of the ERPs to control things. So now it's the category leader that decides when a new supplier is being created. It has to go through that gate, right? and they can directly control digitally which suppliers are getting the purchase orders, right? So I think that's it starts and ends with master data. If you start with bad master data, you've got
absolutely
a long uphill battle.
And what platform do you use for supplier onboarding needs? This is a question that's come through. Is it all integrated into this, or is it something you've built?
Yeah, no, it's integrated. So look, I didn't mention it, but it's Synertrade that we're working with on this whole Schneider Supplier portal platform that I've been talking about. And that's one of the onboarding is one of the processes that we co-developed with them in that tool.
And how easy is it for suppliers of different levels of maturity, and what kind of tiers of supplier do you pull into this strategic platform? I mean, I know you talked about 80% of your suppliers go through that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, 80% of the spend is covered, and actually, I think the number is much higher than that, to be honest. But we're focused on the suppliers that we know we're going to be continuing to do business with for a long time. And we won't necessarily put every new potential supplier into that ecosystem unless we're confident that we're going to stay engaged with them. We do a lot of work with startups, for example, mostly on the innovation side, naturally, right? And how we manage startups, we use a totally different set of processes than our normal processes, right? Because you can't like audit the quality process of a startup company because they don't have any, right? So for example, companies like those, we wouldn't necessarily put into this tool right off the bat if we're taking a lighter approach to how we're managing them. But for the most part, most new suppliers would be going into that tool.
Great. I have another question for you. Was there any resistance through your supply chain to buy into the digital strategy, and how did you overcome this?
Yeah, I would say passive. For me, the resistance starts with the investment, right? So you want to, and that's a bit of a leap of faith, right? So what is the ROI on such an investment? I think it's impossible to really pin down. There's pieces you can take, like the e-sourcing bit, for example, and say I'm going to be able to get additional productivity because I have these more robust sourcing processes. But for the most part, I don't think you can measure the value. So getting the business behind the idea that this is something that's going to create value is a big leap. But I think the experience of the last couple of years is actually a pretty strong argument for such digitization and can boost those arguments. Another, I would say, kind of key success factor in that too is just having the trust of whoever is holding the purse strings in your company, that you're able to execute on this and extract the value. And in Schneider, we had to do that kind of in baby steps, with small investments at first, to prove that we can be successful in deploying something. We didn't come with 30 processes all at once and deploy them all at once. This was a very gradual rollout over the course of 4 years or so. So just one little simple process at a time, rolling into the tool. So I think to do things incrementally in a step-by-step manner, it's kind of the Schneider way, but also I think it's a smart way of deploying such things, and it helps drive adoption. It helps drive when you do things more gradually, right? Nobody likes change, and I think everybody hates immediate, fast, dramatic change. So to the extent we can do it step by step, I think that helps with the success of the deployment.
Excellent. Another question's come through, a good question. Are you currently only looking at your tier 1, or can you, through your platform, look at other tiers, or is there future for that? I mean,
yeah,
it's really everybody's utopia, I guess.
On everybody's mind, right? Yeah, I'd love to sit here and say we go 10 layers deep across the board, but no one would believe that. And that's absolutely not the case. But this is now on the roadmap, right? We have to do that. You have to get to that. It's very challenging, right? Because of the complexity. We're already complex enough, and now you say you want to go multiple tiers upstream. It's exponential, that complexity. So we're trying to figure out how do we narrow the focus? How do we get more surgical, right, with that upstream dive? But it's absolutely in our roadmap to connect multi-tier suppliers into that ecosystem. selectively, I would say. And we're just trying to figure out where the hot spots are, and we want to focus that. Yeah.
Excellent. Dan, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. It sounds like you've made massive amounts of headway and produced something that allows you to be more agile, get more visibility, drive more innovation, tick all those sustainability targets as well. So we wish you the very best of luck with this project. And thanks for sharing your story with us today.